From one sports fan to another, hello, how are we doing? It is a great day here for me. Just enjoying some time off. Gonna get some of these episodes recorded. Gonna do the NFC preview this week. Did the AFC last week. Go check those episodes out on YouTube or Spotify if you have not already. And then we'll do the NFC this week and finish it off with a full-on playoff prediction. And I will be saving this document, holding on to that, so that way I can kind of compare, because I am kind of curious to see how I do in terms of accuracy and all that. So today is going to be the NFC North and the NFC East. Friday will be the NFC South and the NFC West, as well as the full playoff prediction at the end of that episode. So, starting off today, we're just going to jump right into it. The NFC North, arguably the toughest division in football. All four teams finished above 500 last year. I believe this is the only division where that was the case. And yeah, it's going to be competitive again this year, but I do have a pretty solid idea of where things are going to stand. So, I will say on the outset with division, I mean, if you've been listening to the show, if you know me personally, you know I'm a massive Bears fan. I'll be completely honest, I am a little biased. I am biased. So take that with what you will. I try to be as objective as possible, but I do have some thoughts that might vary. Your mileage may vary based on, how much you actually enjoy a certain team. So, but all that being said, starting in last place in this division, I have the Minnesota Vikings finishing last in this division. And I don't think anybody really disagrees with that one. I do think the Vikings are, the Vikings are a lot like some of these AFC teams, like the AFC South and other, teams similarly, where it's like, there's things to like. Their receiving core is one of the best ones in the league. Justin Jefferson is arguably the best receiver in the league, period. I would say he still is. I know he had a down year last year, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Their defense is still solid. Kevin O'Connell is a great coach so far. Doesn't have a playoff win, but, that's another conversation. But there's just too many questions at quarterback. Obviously, they brought in Kyler Murray this offseason to compete with J.J. McCarthy for the starting job. It's pretty clear Kyler Murray is going to be the week one starter. I think J.J. McCarthy, you can say he didn't have enough time. Well, he missed a lot of time due to injuries, and sometimes that's just part of the problem, is you just miss too much time due to injury, and you don't get your shot. And because you're an injury risk, they're like, no, we're not going to ride with you. So, and J.J. McCarthy's kind of come off as an asshole to me. He's a little arrogant. He's just not that good. And so they brought in Kyler Murray. And, the thing about Kyler is that, he didn't really work out in Arizona. And we've seen, Shanahan and Kevin O'Connell, help Sam Darnold. Sean McVay's helped Baker Mayfield. And you would think O'Connell, the same thing's going to happen with Kyler. But my thing is that you look at Baker, you look at Darnold, you look at some of these other guys that have gone through that, QB reclamation, renaissance with these coaches. Kyler's a different mold than those guys. Kyler's smaller, kind of runs around a little more. I mean, Baker can run, but for the most part, Baker and Darnold, they're more pocket guys, more make the read, make the throw. Kyler's a little more dynamic. In this case, I almost feel like that's going to hurt him a little bit. He's a little bit smaller. Do I expect him to have a better season than he's had the past few years in Arizona? Yes. Do I expect him to be a 30-plus touchdown guy? I do not. I do think, due to injuries he's suffered, due to how he plays, he's slowed down. He's not as dynamic. He just doesn't have the skill set that you really need. Kyler was kind of a cautionary tale, and it was kind of surprising why Bryce Young was drafted number one, because it's if you're a smaller quarterback, you can only do so much in this league. You have to be able to see over the linemen. And if you don't, you have to be able to move. But then if you take too many hits, you're very easily injured. Kyler's missed a ton of games over the course of his career due to injury. And yes, I like his weapons. Like, he has, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. He's got people to throw to. Their offensive line's fine. But I just don't think it's going to be enough, especially when you're in this division. Like, if they were in a different division, could I see them, maybe contending for a wild card? Yes. But since, you're in this division, you got 6 games against very good teams or solid teams at best. I just don't think that's sustainable. And they're not even playing a 4th-place schedule. The Lions technically finished last in their division last year. So the Lions actually get the 4th-place schedule. And I just don't think the Vikings are going to be able – I don't think they have enough. I do think they are closer to, firing Kevin O'Connell and trading Justin Jefferson and starting over entirely than they are, just trying to make a playoff spot. I really do think, if they finish below 500 this year, I think Kevin O'Connell gets fired and I think Justin Jefferson gets traded. And I think it is a very real possibility that they finish 7-10 or 8-9, and that ends up happening. At a certain point, I think this iteration of this team, and it sucks, I don't think that's a knock on even Kevin O'Connell. It's the same thing with Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. It's not entirely your fault. You weren't given the greatest roster, but at a certain point, it's just not working, and we need to go in a different direction. That's just how football works. So I do think the Vikings are kind of trending in that similar direction. I think they're probably doing some scouting on the 2027 quarterback class, just kind of poking around, seeing what's going to be going on, because Kyler's on a veteran minimum prove-it deal. McCarthy's clearly not the guy. And at that point, it's just do we try and trade Justin Jefferson to get some assets to start a rebuild? The Vikings are just in a very weird spot. And I do not like their chances this year at all. I don't think it's going to be a Darnold situation from 2 years ago where he just pops off and all of a sudden they're in the wild card. And even then, they made the wild card and they got creamed. They lost a home. Kevin O'Connell lost a home playoff game to the Giants. I think you've kind of hit your ceiling on what this team can accomplish, or this iteration of this team. So, even with the addition of Kyler. So I have the Vikings finishing last in the NFC North. And then finishing third and missing the playoffs, I have the Packers. And I've been, as a Bears fan, maybe I'm just a hater, but Micah Parsons is going to miss the first couple weeks. I don't think that's good for them. We saw how their defense completely fell to pieces without Micah Parsons last year, so they're going to drop some games early, I feel like. They have to play the Bears in that time period, who I expect to be back and good. They have to play some tough teams in those first couple of weeks, and when you lose your best defensive player on a defense that already was kind of a struggle bus last year without him, I'm not high on that. I expect them to let up some points and struggle there. I expect Jordan Love to have he still doesn't have top-tier weapons. They lost some guys as well in that receiving core. Matthew Golden looks like he's not really what they thought he was going to be. This team identity, Matt LaFleur, is just kind of an offense. I mean, he's closer to Mike McDaniel with the Dolphins than he is to Sean McVay with the Rams. If he was Sean McVay, they would have made a Super Bowl by now with him as head coach. He's been there since the Aaron Rodgers days. If Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur are two different ends of a spectrum here. Matt LaFleur is not a culture guy. He's very good play caller. He's very good offensively, and I think Jordan Love values that. But I don't see this culture. The Packers are intentionally, the reports have come out, the Packers are intentionally targeting guys that are tougher, that are more egotistical almost. This team does not have an identity. They don't have a strong head man in the building. I've talked about this before. I've had this conversation before, and people think I'm crazy for it, but then the reports come out recently that prove me right, and that the Packers are trying to find an identity. The talent is okay, but the identity is just not there. And that starts at the top. That starts with the head coach. I do think the Packers missed the playoffs this year. They've made every single year of Jordan Love's career that they've made the playoffs, even the year they beat the Cowboys and Jordan Love got his playoff win, they've been the 7th seed, which was only created a couple of years ago. They're tricking themselves into thinking that everything's fine because they're making the playoffs, but they're making the playoffs as the 7th seed, which didn't even exist a couple of years ago. And they're making it as a 9-10 win team, 10 wins if they're lucky. Like, Jordan Love has never won the division as a starter. You know, he only has the one playoff win. The last playoff game at Lambeau Field was what, 5 years ago? I mean, 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago. It was January of 22. Like, that just can't happen. Like, you coming off a year where you dropped 2 or 3 to the Bears, including a playoff game where you completely blow it in the second half. I think you've got to do some soul searching as a franchise. And yeah, I think the Packers are in huge trouble. I don't think anybody's talking about it enough. I'm not saying they're terrible, but it's about time to start asking some very difficult questions. I think they're paying Jordan Love too much money. I wouldn't say Jordan Love's a bad quarterback, but relative to his contract, I don't think he's playing up to it. And especially when, he doesn't turn the ball over a ton, but when he does, it is at the worst time, and it is in the dumbest possible way. He will just lose you a game. Like, Jordan Love and Bo Nix are very similar in my mind. Like, middle of the pack quarterback, and they can have good moments, but sometimes they just do something that is just like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I have the Packers finishing third. They're going to kind of be in the same spot, maybe win 9 games like usual, but I don't know if that's going to be enough even. So I have them missing the playoffs. So maybe it's just because I'm a Bears fan, but I am not high on this team at all. I'm not optimistic about their chances going into this year. And then in second place, as a wild card team, I do have the Lions. I like the Lions a lot. I love Dan Campbell. Jared Goff is a top 10 quarterback. Amon-Ra, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta. They probably have the best collection of weapons, possibly in the entire league. And you like a lot, there's really no holes on offense. The defense is still questionable, but there are, but the offense, you love it. 10 out of 10. Like, the only problem is last year they had coordinator issues, losing Ben Johnson. They've replaced things now. Dan Campbell can now step into the play calling role more easily if need be. They just kind of had to work out some kinks of losing coordinators, injuries on defense. Like, it was just kind of a growing pains year that a lot of teams go through when, the Eagles have seen this when they lose coordinators, whether it's Shane Steichen, Kellen Moore, like the year after they would make or win a Super Bowl. You have those growing pains. And, they have new coordinators this year again, but I do think it's kind of similar to the Eagles. It's kind of like, okay, we learned from our mistakes. I trust Detroit now. I feel like they're a competent enough organization to understand this is what we need to do. This is what we need to figure out. I do think there's still going to be some growing pains. I expect Goff to have another great year. Like I said, I just think that there's enough holes on that defense that it's raised eyebrows for sure. I still like Detroit a lot this year. They're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be, what do I have them as? I think I have them as I have them as the 5 seed. I have them as the best wild card team out of the NFC. So they're still going to be very good, force to be reckoned with. I expect them to win a good amount of their divisional games, and then they have a 4th place schedule too. I think that's going to help them a lot. And then that leaves, and maybe I'm biased, maybe Detroit should win this division, all things considered, especially when you look at Chicago's schedule, but I'm biased. What can I say? I do have the Bears winning this division again for the second straight year. I expect Caleb's going to take a massive jump. Like, the jump Caleb's going to take this year is just as big, if not bigger, than the jump he took last year. He lost weight. He's quicker. The reports out of training camp are that he's faster than he was last year, more elusive somehow, that he's also more accurate. And that's scary. Everybody looks better. Year 2 under Ben Johnson, everybody, training wheels are off. Everybody knows what they're doing. You know, you could tell the first month or two of the season last year, the Bears had to learn how to operate Ben Johnson's offense. And by the end of the year, you could tell it's like, okay, we kind of know what we're doing now. And they're picking up where they left off. You know, Luther Burden went down. He'll miss the preseason, but he'll be back week 1. He's going to be super underrated this year. Rome's going to be back healthy. I don't think the loss of DJ Moore is going to matter that much. Colston Loveland could be a top 5 tight end by the end of the year in the league. You still love their running back duo of Swift and Monungai. They returned most of their offensive line starters. The Drew Dahlman loss due to retirement kind of sucks, but, you know, Bradbury, like, picking up the guys that we did, we should be able to figure that out okay. Left tackle's still kind of an issue, but you can tell they're ironing out that position. Defense, losing Kobe Bryant already during training camp sucks. That was kind of our biggest addition of the offseason. But I do think there's enough guys. There's still, like the Lions, there's still holes on that defense. The defense is where they're going to struggle. But I expect this offense to be so dynamic that, like, I expect some shootouts. I expect some high-scoring games. But I do think the defense is better. I like the Thieneman pick, first-round safety. Like, Kyler Gordon coming back. Like, I think there's going to be guys on this defense coming back that missed some time due to injury, that our secondary is going to be a lot better. And then if we could just trade for a pass rusher, that's our only real hole is pass rush. So I have the Bears winning this division. No ands, ifs, buts about it. I expect them to be very, very good. I mean, I expect them to at least match their win total of 11 from last year. I know they have a very tough schedule. Like, the metrics say they have the toughest schedule, but when you actually look at it, it's like, no, they could win that game. They could win that game. And, like, you start going down, it's like, it's a tough schedule, yes, but it's not as tough as you would think. And part of it is because of how I view some of these teams, how I'm predicting things to go going into the season. But regardless, I think Chicago's primed to stick around, maintain their standing, and be very good for a while. And I expect them to follow that up this year with another division title. So that's the NFC North. 2 playoff teams. So only 3 more playoff teams out of the NFC. 4 more playoff teams out of the NFC. Or 5. You know what? Back up. 2 more wildcard teams. And then the other division winners. So we will move on to the NFC East now. The NFC East, I feel like the NFC East and the NFC South are probably the 2 most open divisions in football this year. But we'll do the NFC East today. And in 4th place, I have the Giants. And I'm actually pretty optimistic on the Giants. You know, they hired John Harbaugh. They maintain Jackson Dart. Malik Neighbors is coming back healthy. You know, their Cam Scattaboo's coming back healthy. They brought in Isaiah Likely from the Ravens. Harbaugh brought him over. They do still have some holes on defense. You know, and I do think some of their younger guys like Dart looks promising, but he's still got some maturing and growing up to do. So does Scattaboo. Like, I view the Giants the same way I view the Titans. Like, they've got some adults in the building now that you feel like could really help maximize what's there, but it's a young team, and they're still about a year or 2 away. They look good on paper. They look solid, and there's plenty to be excited about, but they're not there yet. In a year or 2 from now, do I think they're a wild card contender? Absolutely. But not yet. I expect them to be competitive, but I do not expect them to be, like I said, they're kind of in that Titans bracket. Like, you have very few teams at the very bottom of the league where it's like, nah, this team's not going anywhere this year. And then you have a couple of teams in that next tier of, we don't expect them to be playoff contenders this year, but we do like where they're trending. And in a year or two from now, we think they're going to really take that next step and be perennial, like, we got to go for this. And the Giants fall into that category. They moved on from Russell Wilson, fully embraced the Jackson Dart, which is funny that Dable was so big on that. And then they fired Dable, but, Jackson Dart's still around. They were kind of like, yeah, Jackson Dart's going to be the guy, at least for now. So, it'll be fun to see how this season goes. I'm really excited to see how big of a step some of those young guys can take this year. Specifically Dart. I do think a lot of how this season goes for the Giants is going to be dependent upon how big of a step can Jackson Dart take going into year 2. Because he had some really high highs last year, but including that Thursday night game against Philly, but he did have a couple of games where you're like, yeah, he's still got growing to do. He's not there yet, and so expect him to take a jump, but it's going to be a minute. Like, you just got to give it a year or two. But the future is bright. Giants fans, just don't get overexcited on this year, is kind of how I would put it. And then in third place and missing the playoffs, I have the Commanders. Injuries are a problem for a lot of teams. For every team. Every team can get affected by injuries. But Jaden last year scares me a lot. I was watching that quarterback documentary on the new season of that on Netflix. I've been watching that recently. And I forgot Jaden Daniels got knocked out of a game 3 separate times last year. Almost 4. And he had to go into the tent during the 4th one. That is 3 separate games where he got knocked out, missed time. And the 4th game where he had to go into the tent and almost had to sit out the rest of that game as well. Do you realize how insane that is? And how... and it wasn't just like... And it was his arm, it was his shoulder, like, it was all these different, all these different injuries. And it's like, and he did get knocked out of a game in his rookie year as well. People forget that. He actually got knocked out of the game against the Panthers. That's scary. Because, we talk about J.J. McCarthy dealing with injury problems. Jaden Daniels, now granted, obviously, their play on the field is on 2 different ends of the spectrum. Jaden Daniels is obviously much, much better when healthy than J.J. McCarthy. That is 100% true. But Jaden Daniels is becoming a major injury risk, and you start to see, like, for a Washington team, it's like you start to feel like it's RG3 all over again. Like, high highs, but then he starts getting banged up, and it's just not the same. This year's a big year for Jaden. He's got to stay healthy first and foremost. I mean, to be fair, most of the games when he played last year, he didn't look too bad. He actually looked pretty solid and reminded us of his rookie season, but he was just so injured that, like, he's got to stay healthy. And, Washington, they bring in Stephon Diggs after sending Debo back to the Niners. Terry McLaurin and Stephon Diggs is going to be a great wide receiver 1 and 2. Turn a lot of guys on offense. I still think that defense, I know they drafted Sonny Styles, which is a great pick, but that defense still is just, outside of Styles, it's still old and slow. It's still, it was one of the worst defenses in the league last year. Like, I don't know if Jaden Daniels, like, being healthy would have helped them make the playoffs because of how poor it was, and I don't think they did enough to change that. I expect them to be more competitive than they were last year because I don't expect Jaden to miss as much time as he did last year. But I think they have way too many holes just across the board. I think, like, their running back position is still a position of need, I feel like. They're Jaden Daniels kind of has to be their run game as well, which isn't helpful. And I just think their run to the NFC Championship game 2 years ago, that was in large part because of Jaden. I mean, he really propelled that team, and he kind of masked a lot of the holes that were there. A lot of the holes that are there with Washington now were there 2 years ago, but they kind of got hidden because, Jaden was just that good. I mean, he really was. But when he's not playing, you kind of see that. And I think that exposure last year is really going to hurt them this year, especially because Jaden, I feel like now that he's been banged up a couple of times, teams have film on him, he's not going to surprise anybody. Like, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I like Jaden, I do, but outside of that, and I like his receiving core quite a bit too, but outside of that, there's not much to love with Washington, and I think they're going to be out on the outside looking in once the playoffs roll around, for sure. And then in second place into this division, making a wild card spot, I have the Eagles. The Eagles are a weird one because they're just so bipolar. Like, either, like, the past 4 years, they've alternated making/winning a Super Bowl with falling apart completely as an organization and getting blown out in a wild card game. Like, they've alternated that every year, and now they're coming off the year where they get blown out in the wild card, so you expect them to be really good, but, I don't think Devonta Smith is a number one wide receiver without a really good number two, which I don't think the Eagles have, because I don't think the small, speedy receiver works unless you have somebody complement that and to take pressure off that guy, which I don't think the Eagles do. Like A.J. Brown, even if he wasn't getting the targets last year, his presence was still enough to demand attention to help Devontae Smith pop off a little more. I don't trust Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. I think a lot of the success of the year that he won the Super Bowl was because of teams. Yes, he was Super Bowl MVP of that game, but in the process of getting there, it was very much like historically good defense and Saquon having one of the best rushing seasons of all time. And so, do we expect Saquon to bounce back from last year? Lane Johnson has already said this is going to be his last year. I feel like there's that team, like Howie Roseman has enough control over that organization to be able to keep the wheels on, and it feels kind of similar to what it's been the past few years where some of the past couple of years where it's like they're going to struggle, but like by their standards, but they'll still slip into the playoffs just because of the culture/talent. Like, it's a very weird year. I don't like Sirianni at all. Like, there's a lot I don't like about the Eagles, but I have not liked, like, I don't like Jalen Hurts and how he plays and his quarterback play. I don't like Nick Sirianni as a head coach. I think he's too loud and obnoxious, but it clearly works. Like, it works and it doesn't, so you really don't know what to make of it, but I think there's too many teams in the league where I'm dead set, rock solid, like, this team's going to be good, this team's going to be firing all cylinders. I don't really know what to make of the Eagles. I have them making the playoffs as a 7 seed, but I have a hard time saying, yeah, they're going to win the division. Yeah, they're going to end the world. No, like, they're just a very... I just think there's a lot left to be desired. I don't think they're as bad as some other teams. They'll be competitive just because they always seem to be, but I do expect them to take a step back, and I do think 2 straight years of, wild card. I have them losing the wild card. I'll tease that right now. Even though I have them making the playoffs as a wild card, I have them losing as a wild card team. I think 2 straight years of that, then Sirianni's job's in jeopardy. And even Jalen Hurts is, maybe even depending on how he plays. Because the Eagles have proven that they're not afraid to move off a guy very quickly and pivot if they need to. So they don't have a long leash. They showed that the last time they won the Super Bowl with Doug Peterson. Like, they did not mess around. You have a couple of subpar seasons, we'll replace you in a heartbeat. And 2 years after winning the Super Bowl after this season, I think it's going to be a similar situation. So that's kind of where I stand on the Eagles. I have them making the playoffs, but there's enough I don't like. And maybe it's just personally how I feel about things, but like, yeah, the Eagles are going to be okay, but they're not. I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender. That's for sure. They're definitely not a Super Bowl contender. They're kind of at a crossroads. They're going to be they're kind of a step above, like, I talk about like where the Vikings are at as a crossroad. I think the Eagles are the next tier above the Vikings, but they're still at a similar kind of like, they're kind of right there with the Packers a little bit. Like, there's a lot to like, but it's also like, do you really think this team's going to be a Super Bowl contender anytime soon? I know the Eagles just won the Super Bowl recently, but still, like, this team has shown they can be competitive, but do we expect them to be again soon? Is it time to go ahead and retool and reset some things? So, and that leaves me with the Cowboys winning the division. I live in the Dallas area, and as somebody who's not a Cowboys fan, I can find the Cowboys very annoying. I can find their fans very annoying, and so it really pains me to admit this. I think the Cowboys are going to be pretty good this year. I mean, their offense last year was incredible, and I expect them to be incredible again. I mean, you got Dak. I think Dak is a top 10 quarterback. Dak, when healthy, is really, really good. He's got those receivers that he's throwing to. Javonte Williams was a 1,000-yard back last year. Brian Schottenheimer clearly knows what he's doing on offense. Like, it wasn't like a terrible, as bad of a coaching hire as anybody thought it was. They retooled on defense. They got, Caleb Downs in the draft at safety, which I think he's going to be an impact starter right away. The defense is going to be way better than it was last year, even if it's just be middle of the pack. You don't have to be like a top 10 defense for this team to be really good. Just be middle of the pack. Your offense is going to be so good that your defense can be solid, and this team's going to be really good. And, like, I hate to say it, Dallas looks really good on paper. Like, you have to like it. CeeDee Lamb's one of the best receivers in the league. George Pickens is arguably the best number 2 wide receiver in the league. Like, they are able to be very dynamic in offense and then just be competent on defense, and you're going to win a lot of games. You are. Especially because look at their division. I think they can light teams up offensively against all 3 teams in their division. And I think if their defense is just somewhat competent, I think their defense is probably better than Washington's or New York's. So it's like, shoot, like, at that point, like, I think the Cowboys are going to be very good. I think Dak's going to be in the MVP conversation. And this, as much as I hate to admit it, this is the most exciting Cowboys team that Dallas fans have had in a very long time. I really do think that. I think they're going to be very, very good. And I think it's going to kind of be reminiscent of the Mike McCarthy days where they would win like 12 games like every year and make the playoffs. Now, I'll talk later about how far they're going to get into the playoffs, but I do expect them to make some noise, turn some heads, and be really flipping good, unfortunately, for me, because I'm just going to have to hear it here in the Dallas area for a while. So, yeah, that's going to do it for today. Those are those 2 divisions. So just to recap, I have the Bears and the Cowboys winning the NFC North and the NFC East, respectively. I also have the Lions and the Eagles making the playoffs as a wild card. So to tease the next episode to nobody's surprise, I only have 1 playoff team out of the NFC South and then 2 playoff teams out of the NFC West. And then, on Friday's episode, we will recap the NFC South, NFC West, and then go through the seeding of that, and then I'll do my full playoff prediction on that episode as well. And then, football's right around the corner, y'all. It's so close. The Hall of Fame game on Thursday was fantastic. Absolutely incredible. I know it's just a preseason game, but watching that game made me feel something that I had not felt in a while, and it was great. So, see y'all Friday. Have a great rest of your week. Adios for now. Bye.